For decades, many Indigenous people in Canada were forced into what we call Indian hospitals, which operated between 1963 and 1981. These hospitals were meant to treat tuberculosis among Indigenous people, but in reality, they were places of immense suffering, abuse, and even medical experiments. Many survivors had spoken about the terrible conditions that they faced inside these hospitals, and now, after years of fighting for justice, they may finally receive compensation. One survivor, whose name is Mary Florence, was only 9 years old when she was taken to one of these hospitals. The hospital was in Manitoba. Her mother wasn't even informed of where she was being taken. What was supposed to be a very short stay for treatment turned into 2 years of isolation, painful procedures, and emotional trauma. She described her experience as worse than prison because, at least in jail, a person knows when they will be released. In these hospitals, Indigenous patients had no idea when or if they would be allowed to leave or not. She recalled being confined to a bed for months, undergoing surgeries, and even being subjected to shock treatments. The emotional and physical scar of this experience have stayed with her for a lifetime, and she is just one of thousands who actually suffered similar fate. These hospitals, run by the federal government, were similar to residential schools in their purpose. They weren't just about treating diseases. They were also about controlling Indigenous population and forcing assimilation. According to history, the government used these hospitals as a way to undermine Indigenous authorities and culture. The reality is that these hospitals were part of a broader system of the operation that targeted Indigenous people from Canada. Now, after years of legal battle, the federal government has announced a proposed settlement agreement that could compensate survivors of these hospitals. If approved, this settlement will recognize the suffering that tens of thousands of Indigenous people had to go through. The lawsuit, which was filed in 2018 by a survivor named Anne Hardy, claimed that there was widespread abuse. Hardy, who was treated at a hospital in Edmonton back in 1969, had said that she was abused by the hospital staff and witnessed other patients also suffering similar fate. She didn't file the lawsuit for financial compensation alone. She wanted the Canadian government to acknowledge what exactly had happened. She has now achieved that goal. Under the proposed settlement, survivors who were admitted to these hospitals will be eligible for $10,000 in compensation. Those who suffered any type of abuse could receive additional payments of $2 lakh depending on their experiences. Family members of survivors who have passed away after 2016 may also qualify for compensation. The total amount that the government will pay out remains unknown though, because officials do not yet know exactly how many people will come forward to make claims. Beyond financial compensation, the settlement includes several other measures to support survivors and acknowledge the historical impact of these hospitals. The federal government is committing $150 million towards a healing fund. This fund will help Indigenous communities recover from the trauma that was caused by this hospital incident. Also, adding to this, another $150 million will be used to provide mental health support for those who are affected, recognizing the deep psychological scar left by these experiences. Additionally, $235 million will go towards research, education, and ceremonial effort to ensure that the history of these hospitals is never forgotten. A significant portion of the funding will also be used to locate burial sites connected to these hospitals, as many Indigenous children and adults died while being in the facility and they were never properly acknowledged. Before the funds can actually be distributed, the settlement must be approved by the court. A hearing is scheduled for June, and if approved, survivors could start receiving compensation really soon. The government is really eager to move quickly because many of the survivors are now elderly. Some are in their 60s, 70s, or even 80s, and there is a sense of urgency to ensure that they receive recognition and support while they are still alive. For survivors, this settlement is an important step towards justice. These survivors believe that the stories of those who suffered in the hospitals need to be told so that history is not erased. The legacy of these hospitals has affected not just the individuals who were forced into them, but entire indigenous community. The pain, the loss and the trauma has been passed down through generations. And while no amount of money can actually erase the suffering, acknowledging the truth is a crucial part of healing and reconciliation. This settlement is part of Canada's broader effort to address historical injustice against Indigenous people. But there is still long way to go. Many survivors continue to struggle with the emotional and physical consequences of their experiences. And Indigenous communities still face systematic inequality. However, by recognizing the dark history of these hospitals and compensating those who suffered, the government is taking a very important step towards accountability and justice. The survivors who endured unimaginable pain are finally being heard, and their fight for recognition is leading to real change.